Thank you so much, Kristen. Well, 16 years ago, our 5 kids were ages 4, 5, 7, 9, and 10. And they outnumbered us by more than 2 to 1, and we were losing. Our youngest had just emerged from toddlerhood, and although I really didn't have that glazed, panicked look much anymore, still we looked around us and realized our disciplinary tactics were not working. We were trying natural consequences and behavior modification and corporal punishment. All of these things kind of in a reactionary mode, really. They would act and we would react. And when we actually studied our kids, we realized, oh my goodness, Shannon is turning into the oldest, of course, is turning into a stressed out perfectionist. And Ryan is a bully. And Jason is a liar. And Carson is pig-headed and stubborn, and Heather, the little one, she's like this flaming mess. Everywhere she goes, it's just like this mess follows her. And so Greg had an epiphany. He thought to himself, why is it that I travel the country helping organizations come up with mission, vision, and value statements, and we don't do that in our home? What if we could get everybody together to help kind of define what outcomes we want to have as a result of growing up in the Leith household, and we would all agree to that and buy in and feel ownership? Then the process of getting our kids there would be run through this grid that would be predetermined and pre-established and agreed to. And so we realized that, our tactics in isolation without vision were not working. So I'm picking up on some of what Pam has already said to you. She said vision before tactics. Well, the fill-ins there for you are how you can be proactive and not reactive. This is really key. So what Greg did is he set up a series of family meetings with our family. And so we had all the 5 kids get together every Sunday night for several weeks. And I put up a little artist easel in the kitchen and a flip chart on it and gave the 2 older kids the pens to kind of take notes. And so Greg asked our kids these questions. He said, what do you want our family to feel like and be like and act like? And we just brainstormed on these questions for several weeks. And as we gathered our answers, the older kids kind of were the scribes, and then they helped us to kind of cull down what the best answers that we all arrived at. And then I took a look at this and thought, oh my goodness, how are we going to communicate the essence of these thoughts to our kids in a way that'll stick, in a way that'll get through to them and help them understand what we're all about as the Leith family. And I came up with the really original idea of putting it into the shape of a house. Woo! And so who knew that we were all going to be spending our day on that today? And so I came up with this house, and it looks an awful lot like the blank one that's in the middle of your pamphlet there. If you turn the page, you'll see something that looks a lot like this. And this was our house. Now, you leaders have in your folders for the table handouts to give to them, which is a legal-size picture of a house that's filled in. So if you could pass that around to everybody at your table, you will see what we came up with as a family. It's just kind of a revised version of what's in this frame. And so when you take a look at this structure, you're going to see that in the answer to the questions, how do you want our family to feel? That was what ended up in the external structure of the house. So the foundation is to glorify God. The walls we wanted filled with fun and laughter. We wanted the roof of our house to be a safe place. We wanted our home to feel like a refuge to our kids when they came into it. And so those were kind of the feel-like elements. Then in answer to what do you want our family to be like, those turned into the character traits that ended up in the windows of the home. So those character traits, when you think about it, that's who we wanted our kids to turn. That's the end product. That was what we were gearing towards. Those were the desired outcomes. And so when we were trying to think of who we want to be as human beings, when you think about if we are vessels for Christ, and Christ is living in us, then the way that he shines out of us best is if we look like him. And so these windows, these character qualities, were meant to reflect who Christ is. And the better job we do at building those character qualities into ourselves and our children, then the more Christ-like and the more his light can shine out of us. And then when you look at the door and the stairway, those were the act-like elements. What do we want to act like when we leave our home? And so the door of our home is open and closed through prayer. Those are the decisions. How does our family make decisions? How do we act when we're trying to make choices? We pray about things. And then how do we act when we leave our home? If you can read the statement that's imprinted on the steps, that was kind of the embodiment of what we wanted our family mission to be. So then after we came up with this, we'd spent several weeks, and I stuck it in the house and put it up on the refrigerator. Then we ended up spending a couple of years going through each element of the house, piece by piece. We spent about a month or so on each one. And we did games and behavior modification and contests and memory verses and devotions, and just really unpacked what each one meant. Now, this was one thing when it came to this structure, because everybody's kind of the same when it comes to how do you glorify God and what does it mean to be a lifelong learner and things like that. But when it came to the windows, those character qualities, that was different. Each of our kids has a different learning style, and each of our kids had different needs in these areas. And so I had to make a study of each child and kind of anticipate the issues that were coming up for them and design programs and encouragement and training for each of them that was specified to their personality type. Just to give you a small partial example, if you look at one of the character traits in the windows is servanthood. And we had a definition in our little picture here. The definition is we put each other's needs before our own. Well, our kid Carson, who had a high sense of justice, for him, it was really difficult to serve somebody if they didn't deserve it, right? This was like a really big stretch for him. Whereas our son Ryan, whose name means little king, was living up to his name, and for him, the world existed to serve him. And so this whole notion of servanthood, when we tried to focus him on the concept of servanthood, means the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. That's Christ's way of serving and of being a leader, is the first shall be last. Well, then he was all about figuring out how he could be last so that he could be first. And no, you don't. You don't have this. So over the years of figuring out how to help our kids get character, I ended up that became kind of a watchword of mine and in the area where I developed a little bit of expertise. And so I wrote this book for women, and I just wanted to show you these because this could be something that you might want to do as a study with your adult daughter or your daughter-in-law and or a friend, and go through and talk about, okay, for myself, how do I practice the practices of a Christ-like person? Because you know what, ladies? We can have all the vision we want, but when it comes to tactics, we get stuck. We get stuck all the time trying to achieve our goals and be fulfilled. And we get stuck in the same places all the time. And the places we get stuck are where our character is not like Christ's. And so that's the idea of character makeover. And then we had such a demand to turn this into some content for teenagers, because you got to start young if you're going to overcome some of these strongholds in our lives. And so this is just a Bible study for teen girls. And so I'm packaging these in pairs. So you can buy a pair of books for a good price and a pair of leader and participant guides for a good deal. And these books for the teen girls actually use television reality shows as a view to understanding character. So you use American Idol to understand pride and humility, and you use My Super Sweet 16 to understand contentment. You know, those girls that have like this meltdown because the Mercedes they got for their 16th birthday wasn't the right color, you know. So that. And ladies, the table leaders, you also have these little bookmarks in your folders. You could pass those out because on the back of these bookmarks are 8 character qualities, the ones in this book, and the translation of those, which is a cute little set of clues or reminders of the way that God views character. The next point says, get to a place of agreement. I loved what Pam said about we have power in this place of agreement. And so the idea here when developing your mission statement is to get buy-in from as many family members as possible. Now, in the back of your booklets, there is, next to the page we just looked at, there's an exercise called Creating Your Written Legacy Statement. And this provides you with a series of questions that you can ask when coming up with your legacy statement yourself, and you can then fill in the middle what some of your key elements are. But I would urge you to do this in community. Do this with as many of the people in your family as possible. The power, the fill in there is the word power. The power is in what you ask who. Your who's represent your life stages. And there could be I've thought of about 6 or 7 myself, and you can start this now. Don't be discouraged if you didn't start this when your kids were little. You can start wherever you're at. So if you've got just you and your spouse, you can create a couple's mission statement. We created one kind of unbeknownst to ourselves when we wrote our marriage vows. And as part of our marriage vows ended up making it into the statement on those steps going out of the house. When you have young children, your questions that you ask them are going to be like, what do you want our family to feel like, be like, act like? Those are questions that predict the product. How do you want to, what do you want to turn out of your house when they're all launched? If you've got teens in the house, you could ask questions that help them define their beliefs. When our kids were teenagers, a lot of our parenting by then ended up going back to being reactionary, but we would be parenting through papers, They blew it and we'd have them write a paper on it. And so if they went to a movie they shouldn't have seen, we had them write a paper on how to make good, wise media choices. And if they were surfing the internet where they shouldn't be, what's the effect of the internet on our minds and stuff like that. So make them define their beliefs and research what they believe and prove what they believe and own their beliefs. When you've got young adults leaving your home, the questions that you're going to ask them at that point as a family would be questions of independence. How can I help you to become independent of me? And here at this point, we have often brought in external advisors for our young adult kids for money management or premarital counseling or career advice. Now, you might have young adults returning to your home. We had that. You might think that we raised this perfect family because we had this awesome mission statement. Well, not so much. We had our son, Ryan, who got kicked out of Biola, where my husband is on staff. That was really exciting. And so here he comes back home. And so the question we asked him at that point is, what are going to be the keys to you succeeding at home for this year? And we want you to not leave our home in a year unchanged. So what are you going to do to be a different young man when you walk back out this door? And so he set up what he wanted to read and the pastors he wanted to listen to, and he chose a church to join and to start serving in. And so he kind of set out for him, and we agreed to it, what was going to be the keys to successfully re-entering our home and then leaving again. And then you might have grandchildren. There, your questions are going to be more about your own involvement. What level of involvement can you have? Are you going to do something for their milestone birthdays? How much parenting advice can you offer? But there also is a question of, is there a unique contribution that you and only you can make in the lives of your grandchildren? And what is that? What would that look like? You might be single. You might have never been married, or you might be widowed or divorced. And so you need a personal mission statement. Why are you in this world now? What is your purpose here? Come up with that, define it, and whatever relationships are in your life, define for yourself how you want to operate within those relationships. The last point is maintenance is a must, like Pam said, but my twist on this is status quo is a bust. So your vision should always be your vision. Probably it won't change much over the years, but your tactics should change. Now, I want to give you an example of how that happened in our home. The idea here for a mother is you're moving from mother to mentor. All right, so mothering is a lifelong process of letting go. And we saw this really graphically in the process of teaching our children about human sexuality and relationships. So for instance, for their 8th birthdays, we had a tradition of taking them out for a fancy dinner and then following that up with a talk about the facts of life. And so this was a telling. We would tell them and factual. For the girls' 12th birthdays and the boys' 13th birthdays, Greg or I would take them away on a weekend and go through Passport to Purity, which is a wonderful program from, Family Life, and it's a great way to help kids understand about peer pressure and puberty and purity. And so that was more, we moved from telling to training, okay? Then when our kids were in their mid to late teens, when they wanted to start dating, whatever that age was, we made them write a philosophy of dating. Again, parenting by papers, but this was more proactive, and so we had them answer several questions like, what would be my boundary? Why would I date? Like, what is dating for? Who would I date? When am I ready to date? What character qualities have to be in place in my life before I can start dating? And then what are my boundaries in terms of time? Not just curfew, but is an 8-hour date okay? Is seeing that person every day in a week okay? Not so much. So what would be your time boundaries? What would be your conversational boundaries? Oh my goodness. In the age of the internet and Facebook, kids are saying stuff to each other online that they would never say in person. And so we're escalating relationships artificially through the internet. So what are the conversational boundaries that you need to set? And what are your physical boundaries? And we would practice with the girls how to say no and how to get out of a sticky situation and stuff. So that was more from training to asking. So we're asking them to research what they believe and to own their belief and to define their beliefs and answer several questions. And then lately we've been talking with our older kids about how to know who you should marry and taking them through a checklist of that. And so that's more from asking to coaching. We're kind of giving them some coaching. So do you see what we've done? We've gone from telling facts to training to asking to coaching, and then there's launching. Our son, the one that came home in disgrace, ended up leaving in honor. He got married this year, and we took him away, our whole family and him, and we spent the weekend blessing him. We affirmed his character. We gave him advice for his future. We presented him, this was Greg's idea, to present him with this arrow that was a symbol of his mission, leaving our home, formed on its own bent, with influences of feathers and a tip that was destined for a future that Greg or I would never see. And we were launching him from our home as a representative of the Leith family. And then as a parting gift, we had a copy. Our artist kids had done our family mission statement in the form of an artwork house. And so we made a copy of this and framed it for Ryan and presented it to him. And really, this is our legacy, isn't it? He is the product. He is what came out of our home, and we are now launching him with this memento to remind him of what the values are that we passed on to him. Thank you.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.